Okay, so we can just do a bit of introduction. How JS started. JS was created, I think, in less than a week, in less than 10 days. So it's I can say a pretty confusing language to some people because of the loosely typed nature that it embraces. So that and okay, I think we don't have to explain a lot of things about the nature of JavaScript and the way it started, but that's how it is. We already have JavaScript. It was created at Netscape, the company that created the www and stuff and HTML. Uh, Currently, it's used in a lot of things. It has evolved over the years. It's used in servers by things like Node.js, Dino, and recently banned. And it's also used in mobile development, desktop. Okay, it's used to create nearly everything. So the users of JavaScript to create, of course, dynamic content to 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 power the client side scripts. So things like event listeners and also the server side, on the server side to process data and store data. So we'll just get started on advanced JS. We'll look at closures, promises, async await, the event loop, modules. So to be specific, ES modules, higher order functions, prototypes, and inheritance. And I can also talk a bit about the JS engines like V8, SpiderMonkey, and the JavaScript core. So I think that's the place where we are getting started right now. And talking about advanced JS, so these are not things that you'll you'll basically use every now and then, but sometimes you need them. You really need them to proceed, and sometimes you cannot avoid them. A good example is the async await. Let's say you are fetching data from a server. You have to implement a promise so that the promise will resolve later and then use the data that comes from the server. So that takes, I can say, you cannot predetermine the time that it will take for the data to be fetched. So that's why we need a correct way to wait for the data, and that's where asynchronous or promises come in. Okay, we'll start with closures. So closures are functions that can. Okay, we have something called the lexicon scope. So let's say you declare a function. Let's say this function. If you declare a variable here using let, that variable can only be used inside the function. So instead of using instead of using var, you can use a closure to expose the variable. So when you use var instead of let, the the variable can be used out of scope. So it can be used from outside the function. Uh, okay, I think we can just create a file and just test that practically. So I'll just create a file called test.js. Okay, so here we have a function. We have an outer function here, then we have a variable here. So you can name it whatever you want. But when we run this code, we will get this variable, but we shouldn't. So what happens is if we use an inner function again okay, let's say we have one function, then add another function inside it. that becomes a closure. So it means you can use the function to expose the variables that you have declared inside the outer function instead of using the var keyword. The var keyword, okay, the var keyword is another. It has some consequences when you use it. You can simply use something like var, and then the lexicoscope now comes outside the function. This means this variable can be used from anywhere within the code, but that makes us not be able to redeclare it. So we cannot say let again, then this name other outer variable, something like that. It cannot work. So the V8 engine will throw a runtime error. So that's about closures. So it's like exposing an internal variable. And then we have promises. So we have an example here. So I'll just have to use this and then repaste it here. Let's say we have a function here that fetches data from maybe a table or a database. So to fetch the data, we don't accurately know the time that it will take. So that's an asynchronous operation. If I delete this keyword async, I'll get an error here. So promises are asynchronous. So you have to wait for this promise to resolve, then this execution will continue. So let's try something here. Let me console log something. So I'm console logging hello world after we get the data and log it. If I run this function, all right, since I have a typo. Okay, so you see I get this data received, then hello world. That's because we are logging here hello world, then after the data is received. So if I delete this await, what happens is we'll get an unresolved promise. So we'll get a pending promise. I can say the data has not been fetched yet. That's why we don't get, I can say we don't get the actual data here. We have to wait for the data. That's why we use await keyword. So we have to await for a promise to resolve. So I think that explains the async await and promises. Then the next thing we have the event loop. So JavaScript is an asynchronous language, and we have only one call loop. That means that the functions must be executed in order, in their lexical order. So if you have the first function, let's say you define a function in line 1. So we have something like get data. Don't know why this completion is doing this. Then you can have like, so it means this function will get executed first, then these will get executed. So they have to follow that order. That's how the event loop works. It's an asynchronous language. So the event loop in JavaScript allows us to perform non-blocking operations, even though it's single-threaded. So JavaScript only runs in one thread. So a good example is the set timeout function. So it means this will be executed, then this will be executed, then this will be executed. So it doesn't necessarily have to follow that order. even though JavaScript is single-threaded, it has to execute these functions in order, but that won't. Okay, so we can implement methods like set timeout to opt out of that. So if I run this code, we'll get start, then end, then this log that was in between the set timeout. So it means we don't have to execute functions in order, and this allows us to do. I can say you can still use this to approximate or anticipate for something. Let's say you want to implement a fast mechanism of liking videos. Maybe this is Facebook, or you are working on Instagram. So you want the UI to update immediately, then try to process the data if the like was sent to the server successfully, and a success message was returned. So this is what you can use. You can immediately update the UI, then you set timeout, something like this. Then we have modules. Modules are a way to, I can say, share code. So here I have an example of a function that can be shared between two files. So I'll have to create another file here. So here we have a function called add, and then we are exporting this function. So you can export it this way, or you can export it here. So we have multiple ways of doing it, but I'll just leave it the way it was. So we are importing the function here and then using it to add two numbers. So okay, let me just check this error. Okay, I don't know why this is still failing. So this should be correct. Okay, so it's the issue of modules. So I have to initialize this repository to this folder too. in the package JSON or use .mjs extension. Okay, we'll just use that to avoid
Hello.
Hello, I can hear you.
Inside the package.json, you can set the type to module.js so that it can allow import and export statements. Type, then module.js. Now you can use import and export like in React.
But still that works. It's still not working. Okay, I don't really know the issue here. Okay, I was calling the wrong function. Okay, so that works. You can see we get the sum. If we change this to like 3, we still get the sum still. Okay, so that's all about the modules. So you can do like, maybe this can be a file called user.js. It can have all properties about a user. And then you can import the properties or functions that belong to a user in another file and then use them. Then we have higher order functions. This just enables JS to allow in other languages. Okay, in many languages, you cannot pass in a function as an argument to another function. But in JavaScript, that's so common. So you can pass in functions into another function, and that enables JS developers to perform some operations. I can say some operations using prototype functions, things like let's say filtering an array, or okay. I think another use case is any operation that involves an array can use this ability for higher order functions. So yes, any object, really any objects, things like JSON format, use higher order functions for things like formatting. And so as you can see in this case, we are calling this function called process user input and passing in the greet function as an argument. So, and it still works. So it treats this first function as, I can say, as a variable. Still functions are variables in JavaScript only. So you won't try this in another language, it won't work. So yes. We can do maybe an example here. let array is equals to like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then okay. This is my copilot, so we are passing an anonymous function here and then multiplying each element by 2 instead of writing a for each loop or a for loop, and we still get I can say the multiples of each element from the array. So this is one example of an higher order function in JavaScript. So we have the JavaScript engines. The JavaScript engines include the V8. V8 runs in Chromium and in Node.js. We have the monkey what? We have this spider monkey. Spider monkey is found in, I think, Firefox. And we have the JavaScript core, which is found in Safari. So all those are JS engines. They can compile JavaScript into either machine learning, into either machine code or into WebAssembly. So it's those two. Okay, so we can talk about the just-in-time compiler too. JS is executed after it has been compiled. So JS is a compiled language. And garbage collection just means that you don't have to allocate memory to these variables that you declare. So you can just declare const name and then use it without wondering how much this will affect the memory so much and things like that. The compiler will handle them for you. So JavaScript is a garbage collected language too. I don't know what else to talk about according to this. But at least you need to understand the promises, you need to understand the modules, and okay, I think we have the prototypes and inheritance, and you need to understand, okay, this one you don't really need that much, but you need to understand modules and promises because I can say they are more common. So prototype and inheritance allows JavaScript to modify objects without redeclaring them. If you are from a language that has strict typing, a good example is C# or Java. You cannot do this, but in JavaScript, you can add a function. Outside the class, you can add a function to a class other the class. A good example is this. We have, I can say, an object called a person. So this object has only, I can say, takes in a name as a parameter, as a constructor. So we construct a person with only a name. This person doesn't have any other function. But here we are creating a prototype of a person and assigning a method called say hello as a function to the object. So after that, we can call the say hello in any I can say in any object that we already defined after creating the prototype of it. So it's, I can say, a simple term to explain it is like extending. We can extend classes after we have created them. So prototype is not defined. Wow. Okay, I think I'll just have to execute this. It should be test.js. So if I execute this, you'll see we get, hello, my name is Alice, but we did not have that function in the object. We just added it later. So I think that's all about the advanced JavaScript. If there's a question, I think I can save a question. If there's no question, we can proceed. And don't worry about these. I can say these advanced JavaScript. They are not things that you don't have to memorize, or you don't really have to cram these. You'll find them later. You don't have to struggle with them so much. Personally, I'm not an expert in these advanced JS. Actually, I'm not an expert in JavaScript in any way. I cannot call myself a senior development in JavaScript. Uh, you just have to know that they exist and you can use them. But you really need to know the promises, the promise and the yes, you need to know the promise to fetch data, because this async await is used a lot to fetch data, and you need to know modules because you'll be using them everywhere. Anytime you're using Node.js or React or any framework, actually every framework is a module. So we'll get to see that in this next, I can say next chapter or something like that. Okay, so if there's no question, we can just proceed. I can see we are already 34 minutes past. That's late. Okay, JavaScript frameworks. A framework is just a collection of pre-written code. Uh, a good example is maybe when you are creating a React project, you have to run a couple of commands. So you can use maybe Vite to create a React project, or you can use npm itself. You can also use the React CLI to create a new JavaScript, let's say a new React framework. So when you do that, what it does is it pulls, I can say, some code from npm. So after pulling that code has is bundled. That code is bundled with, I can say, the initial instructions, or the initial guidelines. Okay, something like that, to get you started. So you already have the code written. So what you need to do is to extend it. Now you have to create your own components or things like that. So now that's a framework. Frameworks include libraries, tools, and things like that. I'll be using React as an example because React is too common. So in React, you can have something like React Router as a tool, or you can have Redux, or okay, we have a couple of tools there, or React charts to draw some charts and line graphs. So that's what makes a framework a framework. You already have some guidelines, or you have some starter code that you use. So why should you use a framework? Why not just use vanilla JavaScript? The problem with vanilla JavaScript is the UI is decoupled from the JavaScript. You can't really know what's happening. You have to grab elements from the document API. You have to manipulate and then re-render them again. So it's really hard to do that. Actually, when let's say you are going to build a big project, you can't really manage using vanilla JavaScript. It will be hectic. Uh, you won't find assistance in things like, let's say, routing. You'll have to find your way around that. You'll have to re-engineer. You have to create a router by yourself, and that's really hard. So that's one of the reasons that you need to use a framework. It makes work easier. It simplifies some things. You really don't have to re-engineer many things. Uh, Another thing is it's efficient. So you write less code. So it's like less code, more functionality, or something like that. Consistency, it means you already have a couple of rules. Okay, let's say in React, for example, you have to create a function, then return JSX from the function. It must always be that way. You cannot change that. So at least you have some consistency across your components. You already know all your components start with a function. Scalability, so these modern frameworks have the ability to scale and also to render from the edge. They call it the edge. So it's something like rendering from the nearest server to the user. Then we have community and support. I think you understand this one. JavaScript includes a lot of hype. Everyone has their home. So we can say I'm a React developer. So when you are a React developer, you belong the React community. You'll be interacting with React people. So that's like the community and support. If you get an error, another React developer can assist you. But if you are using vanilla JS, if you get an error, sometimes it can be on your own, or it can be something that somebody has not met before, and that will be very hard to solve on your own. So I think I'll just go back to this mod. So these are some of the popular frameworks. We have React, this is Svelte, this is Vue, and this is Angular. So React is okay, I think we are going to the next part there. So, okay, I have to talk about this because it's really something that's of concern nowadays. We have the newer generation of programmers not wanting to I can say use other languages or other frameworks. Even after you choose a framework, you still need to be flexible. You won't just choose React as your best and only framework and then be employed in Google, and now you are required to use Angular, and you want to tell everyone to change to React because you love React. Now that won't happen. So what happens is you need to be flexible. Even after you choose a framework, you need to be open-minded about other frameworks. You need to learn and you need to accept to join new communities and interact with them. So I have some presentation here about the frameworks and their popularity, maybe some use cases. So we already know React is the most popular. React is the most popular and the most downloaded and the most used frameworks. React was created by Facebook. Uh, I don't remember the year clearly, but it has been very influential in the JavaScript ecosystem. But Vue is the framework with, I think, the most number of likes of in GitHub. So the GitHub repository for Vue is open source, and it's a minimal UI framework. You can even use something like a CDN to add it to your project. So it's loved. We have Angular. Angular ties with Vue in the number of downloads, so they are not far behind. We have Svelte. Svelte, I think it's the younger brother that's coming up. Then from there we have frameworks like Solid and Quick. Uh, those are now like the next generation after maybe these. Maybe so. Okay, so to choose a framework, you need to consider some things. You need to consider the project requirements, you need to consider performance, you need to consider the learning curve. Let's say maybe you haven't learned any framework and now you want to use a new framework, maybe to do a blog post, and the blog post is required after maybe 2 days. You cannot choose a framework like Angular. Angular will take you some time to figure out. Community and support, scalability. the ecosystem, and the developer experience. Or we also have maintenance. So you cannot use a framework that will be maybe will stop being maintained tomorrow or the next week. You'll have problems with it. Talking about project requirements, this includes if you are going to work with, I can say, a number of people on a simple or an enterprise project. You need to consider that. You need to consider the number of people who are going to work on the project. Let's say you are 5 people, and then 3 people already know React, then the two know, maybe one knows Svelte and the other one knows Angular. So you just have to go with React because that's the most common there. Performance. So on performance, Svelte is the highly, I can say, Svelte is highly optimized, then Vue, then React, then Angular. So that's performance wise. But Angular is heavyweight too. So I don't really know which comes first between this and this, but Svelte comes first in performance. So if you want to build an application to do things like enterprise real-time management of some data, it's a good idea to use Svelte, or to do things like 3D modeling. You have to use Svelte, but you don't have to steal. It's a preferred choice. It's not a must that you have to use this. It's not a do or die. It's I can say it's a suggestion. It's the most right thing to do, but you don't have to follow it. So that's performance. Performance, we have Svelte coming first. For project requirements, I think that will just go with the type of project you'll be doing and the number of people working on it. Community and support, React has the most active and the largest community, of course. Scalability. So talking of scalability is something like extensibility. Are you going to work on this? Is this project going to be extendable or something like that? So this goes hand in hand with complexity. I think all of them can scale, but the preferred choice here is React still. Ecosystem, React still. Developer experience, that's just goes with the, I can say, different people have different tests. Personally, the most I can say the framework that I'm most comfortable working in is React and Svelte. Svelte is minimal, but React is common. So, and normally we work on some project with a couple of people. So we have to use React because it's just too common to ignore. Maintenance. Maintenance, I think React cannot be dumped overnight because it's supported by big tech. Angular 2 by Google. Vue, it's just an independent person. Svelte, an independent person. So if they get something better, they can just leave them. But I don't think they will. At this point, the ecosystem has grown so much that they cannot just leave these projects and start working on a different thing. Okay, I think that's all I have. I don't have any personal suggestions on what framework you should choose or what framework or whatever you should do, but this is the UI. This building UI. UI can be built in a number of ways. We don't have one strict way of building user interfaces. You just have to consider whatever you are doing. If it's a project, you can use any framework. If it's a side project, you can just use any framework. But if you are working with people, I recommend using React because React is common and it's not that hard to learn. So React is just a function that returns. Maybe we can do something like function UI. Then here we return JavaScript, we return HTML here. So now this is JSX. This is valid JSX. So this is how React looks like. So it's not something hard to learn or something that complex for anybody to figure out. So it's just a JavaScript function that returns HTML. I think that's the end of my presentation, unless someone has a question about anything. Okay, if there's no question, then I think Alex, you can speak something.
Unajua ni kujitolea pia nini, ni kitu inakwanga imetoka somewhere deep within you. Si kila mtu kuwa na that hiyo roho ya kukuja kusacrifice their time and show us something new. So once again, thank you Raccoon. Yeah, so also said, I mean, Kenya Raccoon amefunza about frameworks. I'll just tell you that don't be a framework developer. Kama sahi tu once wangu specialize, you'll feel like your career is done. Yeah, so go be a developer. Don't. Yeah, so thank you all for joining. Yeah, unless kuwa na swali, you can, I guess you can depart. Want to contact you? Was recorded on YouTube. The link is in the. Can go watch it later in case kuna place haukushika vizuri. Yeah, so I think that's all. Yeah, Raccoon, in case unaweza share.
Okay, so my username is Raccoon. Let me just type it in the chat. I think pretty much everywhere, Raccoon 254. If it's not Raccoon 254, it's Raccoon.254. I think that's okay. So, yep.